This is a mini episode to tell you a little about what I got up to last weekend. I'm still buzzing about it, and what to expect from the show in the coming weeks. Welcome to the Casual Birder podcast. I'm Suzy Buttress. As a casual birder, I take pleasure in watching the wild birds around me, wherever I am. In my show, I share the joy of birding. I tell you about the birds I've seen, speak with experts and enthusiasts, go on bird outings, and I share stories from birders around the world. Last weekend we were at Global BirdFair, a wonderful 3-day event centred on birding and nature held in Rutland in the UK. It's an awesome event featuring many talks and presentations from wildlife professionals, exhibition tents with stands from companies selling products such as optics, outdoor clothing, bird feeders and wildlife accessories, representation from a wide range of tour companies and tourist boards from around the world, enticing us on dream vacations to key birding locations, and an art tent where people who have been inspired by nature can sell their creations, and it included wood carvings, photography, paintings and sculptures. Global BirdFair is also a fabulous place to meet up with old friends and make new ones. This year it was very challenging weather-wise, unfortunately. Whereas last year it was very hot, this year it was very wet, and we also had very high winds. But we're all outdoorsy people, and we just put on our wellies and our outdoor clothes and got on with it. I don't think anyone lost any wellies in the mud. But the really exciting thing for me this year was that there was a podcasting stage sponsored by Swarovski Optic, on which several wildlife and birding podcasts produce live shows. It was so lovely to meet up with the other podcasters and chat with them in person. So, a shout out to Ryan from Into the Wild podcast, Charlie and Dan from the Wildlife Community podcast, Hannah and Erik from Hannah and Erik Go Birding, Nick from Wilder Skies, and Connor and Steph from Planty Planty Zoo Zoo. I was also really happy to meet with David Oakes from the Trees a Crowd podcast. David didn't present any shows on the podcasting stage, but he did host a full episode of his own show live on one of the bigger stages, as did Ryan from the Into the Wild podcast. For the rest of us, it was the first time we had presented our shows in front of a live audience, and I know that I had a few nerves about it. But with the support of my guests, the other podcasters and our wonderful producer Oscar, it all went swimmingly. And big thanks are due to Charlie Bingham, who organised the schedules of the podcasters and guests, kept us on track, and who ironed out any little issues that arose. If you were at the Global BirdFair and saw some of the live recordings, you may have thought you'd missed hearing the whole interview. Don't worry. Over the coming weeks, the interviews we recorded will be released so that everyone can enjoy them. I've put links to everyone's shows in the episode notes. Do check them out if you're not already listening to them, as you may well find your new favourite. Well, maybe not your new favourite, because obviously that's me, but maybe a new equal favourite.
Hello and welcome to the Wildlife Community Podcast. I'm your host, Charlie, and each episode I'll be bringing you conversations with other people who are passionate about connecting people and nature. Join me as we delve into discussions about wildlife, share top tips, and inspire you to transform your local areas into thriving natural havens, and above all, helping you to make your space a wild one.
Planty Planty Zoo Zoo is hosted by myself, Connor, and my fiancée, Steph. We both met working in a zoo, and her background is plants while mine is animals. So Planty Planty Zoo Zoo is our excuse to design a hypothetical zoo/botanic garden that can be exactly what we want it to be. Each week, Steph will bring a species of plant, and I will bring a species of animal, and we'll add them to Planty Planty Zoo Zoo. And we'll talk every week a little bit about the conservation stories of those species, why we want them in a zoo/botanic garden, the stories we want to tell our hypothetical visitors about them, and the way we show them off in a cool, engaging way as well. So that's Planty Planty Zoo Zoo.
So this episode is just to tell you a little bit about the wonderful guests that I interviewed and give you a taste of what's coming up over the next few weeks. I had a joint conversation with Becky Spate, the Chief Executive of the RSPB, and Patricia Zarita, CEO of BirdLife International, about their passion for wildlife, the challenges faced by women in conservation, and how they would spend their fantasy birding day. Simon King, beloved TV presenter and wildlife filmmaker, who worked on Springwatch for many years and produced Big Cat Diaries and more recently the Wild Isles series with David Attenborough. Alan Davis and Ruth Miller, who in 2008 sold up everything and travelled the world to see as many birds as possible. They wrote about their adventures in their book, The Biggest Twitch. Ruth still holds the world record for seeing the most birds by a woman in 1 year. They now run wildlife tours in their home country of Wales and also around the world. Hannah Bourne-Taylor, who has been instrumental in bringing a petition to Parliament to have swift boxes included in new build houses. Over 100,000 people signed that petition, and the debate was heard in Parliament during the week before BirdFair. You can hear more about that in the episode when I speak with her. Aryan Devashas, who's a TV presenter, podcaster, and who is the current world record holder for seeing the most bird species in 1 year. His new book, The Big Year That Flew By, is coming soon. I was delighted to speak again with author and producer Stephen Moss. I met Stephen at last year's BirdFair. We had a longer chat this time, and I was able to catch up with what he's been doing since then. Hannah and Erik from Hannah and Erik Go Birding. That's a podcast I listen to a lot, and it was a delight to get the opportunity to speak with them for the show. Hannah also hosts 2 other podcasts, Women Birders Happy Hour and the Bird Nerds Book Club. Podcasting is clearly a dangerous hobby to get involved in. I spoke with Boris Belchev, who runs Alcedo Wildlife Tours in Lithuania. I also spoke with Boris briefly last year. He supports my show and he's been part of our international birding team for the Global Big Day and the Global Big Weekend. He was giving a talk at the Bird Fair, and it was really lovely to catch up with him and hear all about his latest offerings for his tours, including a floating hide, which I know my husband is very keen to go and try. And last, but by no means least, Mike Dilger, TV presenter, passionate wildlife educator, and author of the recent book 1000 Shades of Green, about his attempts to find and identify 1,000 plants in the UK. Mike was also the tour leader when we went to Scotland a couple of years ago, and we had an absolutely delightful chat about some of our memories of that birding trip and what I learned from him.
Hello everyone, I'm Neil Phillips, one half of the UK Wildlife Podcast, a podcast that looks at all British wildlife. We have expert guests such as Dr. Erica McAllister on flies and Professor Nick Davies talking about cuckoos, nature authors such as Stephen Moss and Nick Gates, wildlife TV presenters such as Nick Baker and Yola Williams, as well as those behind the camera such as Wild Isles producer Hilary Jeffkins and wildlife cameraman Doug Allen. And of course, our popular Species Fact File episodes, where we dig deep into the details on a particular species or group. So search for UK Wildlife Podcasts in all the normal places and come check us out.
Hello, Nick Patel here from Wilder Skies, the podcast. I'm a birder, a conservationist and a tour guide for Wilder Skies Somerset Nature Tours. But as for the podcast, it's a place where we talk about birds, wildlife and all the hard-hitting conservation topics on the top of everyone's minds right now. Each episode we delve into different guests from all areas of the nature sphere. We talk about serious topics, we laugh a little and dig into some of their favourite species and parts of wildlife.
In between my interviews, I did a little bit of outreach, chatting to people about what was happening on the podcast stage and how to listen to podcasts. And if you are now listening to the show, thank you for chatting with me. I'd also like to give a shout out to Martin, a long-time listener, who gave me some thoughtful feedback about the show, Alex and Maggie, Sue, who told me about some of her birding memories in Essex, and Pete, who kindly spent a cold afternoon chatting about birds. I hope you've stopped shivering now, Pete. I'd also like to give a special shout out to Owen, one of the members of the Casual Birder Bird Club, who was attending Global BirdFair anyway, but who very kindly came along to pretty much all of the episodes I was recording. It was really lovely to see a familiar, supportive face out in the audience, so thank you very much, Owen. The episodes recorded at Global BirdFair will be released starting at the beginning of August. Before that, next episode, I chat with birder Mel Shepherd-Wells, sharing his birding adventures and what he did to celebrate his 50th birthday a decade ago and what his birding has been like since then. The episode after that, I welcome Chiara Taglia, birder and photographer who has a fab channel on Instagram. Do check it out. Chiara shares lots of tips on how to improve your bird photography. She'll also be our guest presenter for August's Casual Birder Bird Club about how to be a better bird photographer, both technically and artistically. If you're not a member of our virtual bird club, do look for the link in the episode notes and sign up to receive the emails about upcoming sessions. We'd love to see you there. I look forward to catching up with you soon. My thanks to Randy Braun for designing the artwork for the show. The theme music is Short Sleeve Shirt by the Drones. Thanks to them for letting me use it. Check out their website at dronesmusic.net. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode of the Casual Birder podcast.